Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining the sessions. My name is Asanka Padmakumara. In this session, I'll be exploring the cloud data warehousing solutions and what are the options, and basically cover the keywords and in the cloud data warehousing. We'll start with a brief introduction to myself. My name is Asanka Padmakumara. I'm a principal engineer as well as the practice lead for the data engineering in ClearPoint. I've been working to data and related technologies for almost 12 years now. And I'm a Microsoft MVP for data platform in New Zealand. Whenever I have free times, I talked about the data engineering and the data and analytics. So you can go to my blog, you can connect me from my LinkedIn, as well as you can follow me from the Twitter, so that we can talk about this session as well as the other data and analytic solutions or the questions that you have. Let's go for the agenda. So the agenda in this session is like, I'll be mainly talking about the what is a data warehouse, and then why an organization needs the data warehouse, and if you choose to implement a data warehousing solution in your organization, why do you want to consider cloud, as well as the options and the selection criteria for a data warehousing solution within an organization. Let's start this session by having a look at what is an data warehouse. If you think about an organization, in any organization, we have multiple departments to work on different sections of the business. Right? For example, like you have the accounting department, you have the HR department, you have the supplies, and you as well as the all those different set of departments. Right? And to run each department, they use different set of softwares. For example, like the accounting, they have the accounting software, and the HR team has the HR software, as well as we have the ERP system and CRM, so on and so forth. Each system generates their own set of data, and it could be from the different database platforms. It could be Oracle, SQL, and open source. And within the organization, some of the organization want to see a holistic view of their business to analyze how the business performs. They want to consolidate all the data coming across different platforms, right? For example, if I take an example, like if someone wants to see how they are profit for their employee count, they want to combine the data coming from the HR system as well as the data coming from their POS or maybe from the CRM system. So in that case, you need to have a central repository where you have all your data, so that someone can go and plug into your database or the data platform and start the reporting or the analytics. In that case, that is where the data warehousing requirements comes to play. And what are the characteristics of a data warehouse? It has to be a central place where that all the data reside in one repository, one platform. And it has to be organized as well, which means that when you can't just dump the data as it is, what's available in these platforms. You need to make sure that these are organized so that someone can go there and start doing the reporting or analytics. It has to be integrated, which means that you can't just get the data and dump into one platform and ask people to use it. You need to make sure that those data is actually flowing through continuously. So it has to be integrated with all the other backend system or this system that which generate this data. And the other thing is like it has to be read optimistic, which means that optimized, which means that the data coming from these systems should put in a place where that the business users can directly go and read the data without spending like hours to run the query, generate the report. You can't expect them to do that. So it has to be read optimistic. And the whole purpose of in most cases, these data warehouses cover structured data. In most cases, it does not cover the unstructured data like images or the visuals or the videos, right? And idea of having a data warehouse is mainly for do the advanced analytics, do the reporting, and do the dashboarding kind of solution. And when it's come to the backend system or the architecture of this data warehouse, we talked about two categories, SMP and MPP. So I'll talk in next slide what is this SMP and MPP architecture for a data warehouse. The first thing is SMP. So the SMP is the short word for the symmetric multiprocessing, which means that you have a one server which has multiple CPUs, and these CPUs are sharing same disk drive, same memory, as well as the same bus. So what happens is like it's a shared OS, shared memory, shared hard disk, as well as a network. So we call it like shared everything architecture. So if and you want to improve the performance of your hard disk or the hardware, what you have to do is like you have to scale up, which means that you need to add more CPUs to your server. Right? For example, like let's say that you have 128 GB RAM, and you want to scale up the RAM of, you have to go for a higher level of RAM to your server, likewise. And the good thing about the SMP architecture is like it can achieve high concurrency, which means that let's say you have hundreds or 200s of users accessing reports or your data warehouse at the same time. So this is good architecture for scenarios like that. But the problem is like after a certain level, let's say that you have like 64 core CPU, and then you want to go to 128 core, which means that upgrading, the scaling up could be inexpensive. But the other option is like you can go to the massively parallel processing architecture, which means that you have separate nodes. So it's not a one server, you have a cluster of servers. And we call it like shared nothing architecture, which means that only the data is shared. So each server has their own CPU, own RAM, own hard disk, and the data is processed, distributed across these nodes. So we call it shared nothing architecture and this distributed processing. So if you want to improve the performance of the processing power of your server or the data warehousing solution, what you do is like you scale out, which means that you add more nodes to your server cluster, right? The problem is like in the MPP architecture, because it is distributed processing, and you can see that there's a bus connecting these, network bus connecting these multiple nodes, it gives you a low concurrency. So if you think about like 100 and 200 users are accessing the data warehouse at the same time, MPP architecture is not the ideal solution. But it's cheaper to scale out. If you take the previous example as well, if you want to go to the 64 core to the 108 core, it's expensive to improve the performance, scale up. But if you think about like you have like 3 nodes of 4 core machines, adding another 4 core machines to the same cluster is comparatively cheaper. So the scaling out is cheaper compared to scaling up after a certain level. Cool. How do you decide that the data warehousing solution that you're going to build, are you going to go for the SMP architecture or the MPP architecture? So that's what I'm going to talk in here. So if you have a smaller data set, when I say smaller data set, I'm talking about like maybe a couple of 100 GB. That's what's smaller data set in nowadays. So if you have a smaller data set, you can consider going to the SMP architecture. And if you do a like frequent reading, frequent writing to your data, that is again an ideal scenario for the SMP. And if you do a like multiple row by row operations, like you read in the data, you update in the data, like maybe from the CTE or the loops, then I think the SMP is the ideal solution in that case. But on the other hand, like if you have a large database, like large data volume to analyze, I'm talking about like hundreds of GB, maybe even the terabytes of data, that's where the MPP or the distributed processing comes to play. If you have a big data like big data analysis or the batch-oriented workloads, MPP can be the ideal solution or the ideal architecture for you. And also if you have complex queries which process large volume of data in a very complex scenario, MPP can handle that one because of its distributed processing architecture. And it's highly scalable, which means that you can add more nodes if you want, if you're getting more data. For example, like right now maybe you have like hundreds of GB, but if you foresee that there will be like more data is coming in the future, more systems will come to your data warehouse, and it will grow up to a couple of terabytes, I think you need to plan for MPP data warehousing solution. Cool. So why do an organization need a data warehousing solution? That's the other problem. Do we really need a data warehousing solution to your organization? The problems that we have seen without a data warehousing solution, there are multiple sources of truth. For example, like one department will say that this is the sales figure that we calculated based on the data we get. And there will be another department, like maybe the marketing department would say that, no, this is the sales figure based on the information that we have, based on the calculations that we do. So for same value, or the same metrics, KPI, you will have a multiple source of truth without a data warehouse. And sometimes you have a multiple, the data silos within the organization. For example, like the data is generated from the one department that's not being shared across the other departments. So they are the only people who knows about the calculations, right? What's the data is representing. So they do basically generate data silos within the organization. And the data governance become a problem. Who takes the ownership of the data? How do you share the data? There's no unified view of your data without a data warehouse. And the data quality. How do you maintain that your data is quality, the quality of your data? Who takes the responsibility of the quality of your data without the data warehouse? Because each department, each system will generate the data, but that has not gone through a data quality process. The efficiency. There are scenarios that I have seen that the multiple members within the organization create same set of report, and they basically use same data but slightly different versions of the report, but amount of time they put forward to work on this report. That's the problem, because I have seen like there are certain employees who the whole work they do is like create the report for their CEO. So they spend a lot of time on that for the efficiency of doing analytics. And then the instance access to the data. So if you want to access the data, if you want to create a report, sometimes you have to go through whole process getting access. The access is the main issue to source system, and then amount of time you spend to process the data and do the analysis. So you don't have instance access to the data. Sometimes you spend like days or weeks to create one single report. And who's taking the ownership of your data? The other problem is like multiple departments, they will say that this is the data that we generate, but when there's something wrong with the data, there's something wrong with the calculations, there's no single place that who's taking the ownership of the data and the calculation. And if someone wants to do an advanced analytics, the core will be always the data warehouse. Let's say that you want to do like predictive analytics on your sales. You need to have a clear, clean data, the organized data to do your advanced analytics. So that is the role of a data warehouse. That's what data warehouse provide to your business. And then, if you want to create a data warehouse, do you want to go to the on-prem solution or the cloud solution? Why do you want to go for the cloud solution? Now, if you want to go to the cloud solution and the on-prem, there are certain criteria you want to consider. The first one is like the scalability. Now, if you have an on-prem solution, you can basically scale, but it actually resource as well as time-consuming operation. But on the other hand, if you go to the cloud, you can get the instantaneous scalability. Right? You can scale out, you scale up based on your requirement instantaneously. And the availability. So the cloud always guarantee you that high availability. Now, most of the cloud providers, they will say that we have 99% of availability. So because of all the disaster recovery, geo-redundancy, replication, everything is inbuilt for those platforms. On the other hand, if you go for the on-prem solution, you can achieve that one, but if you implement a disaster recovery for on-prem system, it could be really expensive. Security-wise, it's a highly scalable, highly secured environment in the cloud. But on the other hand, you can get a high security, but all depend on the competence of your internal team, how competent them to achieve the high secure environments within your data platform. Right? Performance-wise, again, it's depending on the platform you select, depending on the capacity of the data center you select for a cloud solution. But on the on-prem, again, depending on the hardware you select and depend on your capabilities of your internal team to achieve a high performance solution. Right? Cost-wise, that's a very important thing. When you go to the cloud, you don't have to pay in advance. If you want to implement a data warehouse and see how the platform works, there's no capex. You pay as you go. You dump your data, start using your system, and you can select whether it's work for you or not in any particular platform. But on the other hand, like if you go for the on-prem, you need to do a lot of planning. You need to purchase hardware, you need to train your people, you need to purchase software. All those things comes as a cost for an on-prem solution. The maintainability, so you don't have to do a maintenance of your cloud solution, because in most platforms, the maintenance is done by the platform itself, or the solution provider itself. Whereas in on-prem, you need to have a separate team to work on the performance, work on the security, and all those things in an on-prem solution. Now let's talk about who are the main providers for the MPP data warehouse solution available in the cloud. So we can start from the Microsoft. We have the Azure Synapse Analytics. And from the other vendors like Snowflake is becoming increasingly popular right now. Databricks, again, is a very good platform. They market them as a unified solution for advanced analytics as well as data warehousing. And Google has their Google BigQuery platform, and the Amazon has their Amazon Redshift as the MPP data warehousing cloud solution. Okay. Now, when you have multiple solutions, how do you decide what are the factors you want to consider to go for which provider I'm going to select for my data warehouse platform? The first thing is like the ecosystem. So you need to understand what's the ecosystem right now available in your system. For example, like the system, your organization is already in Azure, right? If so, going for a solution like the platform like Amazon Redshift would not be ideal because there are two different ecosystems. But you need to understand that whether the solution that you select or the platform you select is work with your existing ecosystem. The other one is like the cost, how much it actually costs you, whether it's like the cost for the per second billing, whether you have to, it's a pay-as-you-go system. You need to understand how much would it cost, whether it's actually costed for number of queries that you run. Those factors you need to consider when you select your data warehousing platform. And the most important thing for me, what I believe is like the usage pattern. So you need to understand how your data warehouse is going to be used. Whether it's going to be used like a direct query, which means that all the business users will be querying, hitting your data warehouse and extract the data. Whether you want to run this data warehouse 24/7, and whether you have like the advanced analytic requirements, all those things you need to consider and see whether these platforms support those requirements that you have within your organization. The other thing you need to understand is like whether your in-house team can support this solution. For example, like your in-house team is quite capable of SQL, and then the platform you select, for example, like Databricks, is actually main language they use is like Scala or Python. And if your internal team don't have that skill set, you need to avoid choosing that one because you need to use the internal team to maintain and work on this platform. So you need to understand what's available within your internal team. And the support and the community, the other one is like if you do a bit of a Google search, if you are having some kind of a technical problem and if you search something, and you need to understand that whether there are enough community support for the platform that you selected. And then you have the enterprise support from the vendor that gives you this cloud solution. Okay, cool. So remember I told you that the data warehousing solution mainly focus on the structured data. Let's say that even if you have like a semi-structured data like JSON or the XML, the process is like the ETL process will break down that semi-structured data into structured data and store in your data warehouse solution. But there are scenarios like that you might want to analyze the unstructured data as well. So that is where this data lake concept as well, the data lake house concept comes to play. So the data lake is kind of a different thing from the data warehouse. Again, data warehouse is like a structured data. So the data lake is like you dump everything. It could be like a structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, and then you use ETL operations to create a data warehouse, and then you use advanced analytic processing engines like Spark, Hadoop to do unstructured data analysis. And there's another concepts now getting popular like lake house. That is what Databricks is promoting. So in the Databricks, basically what they say is like you have one unified platform which acts as a data warehouse, as well as you can do advanced analytics, or you can analyze the unstructured data from the Spark cluster. So you have one place to do a data warehouse, one engine to do the data warehousing, as well as the advanced analytics on the unstructured data, and extracting the insight out of that. So that's the data lake house concept. So lake house is not kind of a technology. It's a concept that how you're going to use individual technologies. For example, like even in the Snowflake, you can implement a data lake house architecture. And few things to clear before I wrap up my sessions. First thing is like some people think that now that the data lake is especially when the data lake concepts comes to the picture, people think that, okay, data warehouse is obsolete, now no one is going to use data warehouse. That's not true. Still, the data warehouse is very much alive. Organization still needs to, a central repository where they can do their analysis, they can create their report, to run their day-to-day operations. So the data warehouse is very much alive, still a main component in an organization when it comes to analyze their business. And the data lake is, again, not a replacement for the data warehouse. You will need data lake only if you have like unstructured data, or sometimes when you do want to do kind of machine learning and advanced analytics on your structured data as well. But it's not a replacement for the data warehouse. Data lake plus data warehouse, we call it data lake house, but not a kind of a technology or something like that. It's just a concept, how you're going to implement your data solution. You can have your data lake as well as you can have your data warehouse, and then you can combine it as a data lake house using your processing, the platform you select. And there's another thing that, going around in this data platform world, something called data mesh. So data mesh, I get a lot of queries about what is data mesh, what is this decentralized architecture. It's not a technology and it's not for everyone. Again, that's a very important thing. Data mesh is for like a large enterprise where they actually treat their data as a product. So each department will produce their own data and then they can share it with the other department as well. So you will not build a one centralized data warehouse. You will have a smaller set of data solutions, so data warehouse. But again, it's not for everyone. That's something that you need to keep in your mind, right? Thank you very much for this session. So if you have more questions, you can contact me. You can contact ClearPoint, and we are happy to have a conversation around how you want to build your data warehousing solution. Again, thank you very much for joining the session.